Greg Jones is a three-time NCAA collegiate wrestling champion, and I don't really know if I can convey to you how difficult that actually is if you've never wrestled before, but trust me, one of the hardest things you can do in life. These days, he's the head wrestling coach and partner at one of the best MMA teams in the world, Kill Cliff FC in Florida. And I try to pick his brain as much as I can on different topics. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Here is the great Greg Jones. Hey, let's have a clean fight.
Mr. Jones, thanks for coming on, man.
Well, thanks for having me there, Mr. Light.
I appreciate it, brother. How's everything going down there in Florida with you guys, down at Kill Cliff and the whole team, you and Mr. Hooft?
Yeah, the whole team's a lot of people. So I guess we'll speak generally. Generally speaking, we are doing very well.
Good.
The first, what I call it, 2/3 of the year, we were really busy, a lot of fights. For whatever reason, we slowed down this summertime, which is good to be, around the gym, around all of the guys. We have 2 Bellator title fights on the horizon, a welterweight and a heavyweight title fight. And so I think October, November, December is going to kind of ramp back up for us.
How many days of the year are you traveling on the road?
So probably mid-August. I was just kind of curious. I went back and I don't keep a travel log, but sometime in August, I went back at all of our fights. Sometime one weekend in August, second or third week of August, I had 5 or 6 Sundays at home. So I don't know, whatever that means. And multiply that by 3 to 4, maybe 2 to 4 days, depending on who and where I'm going. It's a lot of time out of the house,
I mean, you guys have a huge gym just full of absolute savages and murderers. How do you guys split up the time with your fighters? And how do you know who you're working with, who Henry's working with, who you guys are cornering? And how are you just divvying up your time and setting your schedule? That's a lot of logistics.
One of the best things for us is we have a good set of professional coaches, guys willing to sacrifice their own time and bodies for the benefit of the larger picture. We don't have any finger pointers on our coaching staff. Me and Henry kind of communicate in a weird telepathic kind of way, where a lot of us working off each other isn't necessarily spoken. Yeah, we just have a very good feel for each other. And that's kind of interpersonally and as well as for the guys and, anything the group team might need. As far as cornering and stuff, the guys generally pick their own corner. And everyone works with everyone. I think that's one of the things that really separate us, is not just from a training partner standpoint in the gym. Everyone trains with everyone. And that's a philosophy that Henry has always had. But me as an athlete too, I think it's valuable in the sense is I started off as a small athlete. I wrestled at 103 pounds in college. In high school. I finished my college career wrestling at 184 pounds.
103?
103 in high school, 184 in college.
Wow.
So I lived the experience of being a smaller athlete, understanding how to move, learning the technique as a much faster, more dynamic athlete. As I got bigger and more mature, I retained those skills. It was just had to be executed against slower, possibly less athletic, less dynamic, athletic type of people. So I think that adds a lot of value in a lot of ways. And I think the number one thing for us as leaders, structure and organization. That's what's going to separate us. That's what's going to continue to separate us. You spent some time with Henry. He's kind of a straightforward, no nonsense kind of guy, and that's kind of what our foundation is built off of.
Why beat around the bush, right?
Yeah, I've never once. I've been with Henry almost 10 years. I've never once had to think, I wonder if we're good or not. You know what I'm saying?
I want to talk more about the gym, but I want to circle back with you to sort of the early days for you and just, growing up and outside of Pittsburgh and just how you got into wrestling and what your family life was like and just sort of take us back to the childhood.
Well, I appreciate that. I sit here as a wrestler. Somehow I found my way into this crazy MMA world, but at the heart of me, I'm still very much a wrestler. And I'm at the point now where I'm looking to start getting back, not away from MMA, but we're structured to a point where I would like to start getting back to my roots a little bit more and do some more true wrestling. But yeah, you're correct. I grew up in a small town about 40 miles east of Pittsburgh called Slickville, Pennsylvania. It's a town about 400 people. I think I may have had a choice of whether or not I wanted to wrestle, but I wasn't willing to find out if that choice was actually true. So what I mean is, people ask me all the time, when do you start wrestling? And I was like, I don't know. My earliest memory that I have, I was already wrestling. Everyone in my family tells me 3 years old, and that seems kind of young to me. So literally, I've been wrestling for as long as I could. I've been involved in wrestling for as long as I can remember. I could remember being so young, and make sure you don't tell anyone this, but I can remember being too young to be able to compete. My dad sneaking into the tournament, getting the registration form, bringing it out to the car, filling it in, and going in and registering me at what I would have had to been maybe 7 years old. I was supposed to be 7, right? Um, yeah, I can remember things like that. I can remember, I was really little then too, and I could remember not meeting the weight class requirements. And my dad, back in the day wrestling, they used to write your weight class, 95 pounds on your arm. So for me, that would have been probably the lowest would have probably been 40 pounds, right? 6 and under 40 pounds.
So was your dad, was he a wrestler?
My dad had more of a wrestling mentality than he was a wrestling coach.
Grit?
A lot of grit, a lot of hard work, a lot of discipline. But as I've gotten older, I don't want to discredit him because my dad, I counted one time, my dad alone, we wrestled in my family basement. My dad alone produced, I would guess, probably somewhere between 13 and 15 Division I wrestlers.
Wow.
In a basement wrestling room, maybe 2/3 the size of a UFC big octagon. But anyway, as I've gotten older and I've kind of developed my own coaching personality and values, I have more appreciation for how good of a coach my dad actually was with what he had. There was no YouTube, there was no Flow Wrestling, there was no nothing. I remember there was one wrestling book that somehow made it to our house because my dad didn't believe in that shit. Just grab his leg, pull him together, and push him over, kind of shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the wisdom and knowledge that was so tied up in everything we did when I was a kid, it obviously set the tone, not just for my wrestling career, but for who I am as I sit here.
And I know your older brother was, sort of paved the way for you as well. When did you sort of know, like, okay, I'm beating other kids and I'm pretty good at this. I'm just going to keep going with this. Were you having a lot of success early on?
I had a lot of success as a kid. My older brother, Vertus Jones, is probably the most important person in my life. And I don't say that in the sense that I love him any more or less than I do my any other siblings. But my older brother is the oldest child. That kind of instinctively comes in with some type of paternal relationship or demeanor or whatever you want to call it. Add on top of that, he's a good quality person. He's a good quality man. Then add on top of that, he was an amazing athlete who went through the process for me and made my goals seem more realistic because I watched him work his way towards them and almost get there. So we grew up in the same house, we drank the same water, we ate the same food. I saw it every day. It gave me permission to set goals that sounded outrageous to other people. So I'm obviously got goosebumps.
I bet, man. How did you sort of stay on track? Because, in my experience, I've known a lot of guys who peaked very early, and it could go two ways, right? They could either be really successful or they can just burn out and they peak early.
Well, I think one thing, and like I said, my dad was hard. My dad was strict as a father and as a coach, and he still is. But obviously, we're adults now. But the things we did in the training in the training environment
Are illegal now.
off the line. I can share with you some of those things, but no. But some of the wisdom in that, again, going back to my father, some of his wisdom is when it was wrestling season, we wrestled. We wrestled really hard for 3 or 4 months a year. After that, he didn't coach us in anything. We played 3, 4, or probably we played 2 or 3 each of us. I'm one of 5 kids I grew up with. We went and played football, we went and played baseball, we ran track. We just stayed busy. So you asked me that question from a position of like stress or burnout. I would answer that by saying that, I wrestled 3 months a year, right? And everyone's always asked me, you won 1 Pennsylvania State wrestling title, but 3 NCAA wrestling titles. What was the difference? I go back to not just the multiple. I'm a believer you should play as many sports you can for as long as you can.
100%.
Especially any youth athlete. Hell, I redshirted my first year of college. I went home for the summer and I played baseball. I never told my wrestling coaches. I played on 2 baseball teams. I came back to school in August, won a national championship that year. That was me. And if I took wrestling too hard and serious, that's where I would run into trouble at.
Side note, I think baseball players are underrated athletes.
It's funny you say that because we shared a weight room with our baseball team at West Virginia University. And like I said, I was a 184 pounder. And if they were waiting outside the weight room for us to leave, I would walk through the hallway. I wasn't one of the bigger guys. I was one of the smaller guys walking through that hallway. No, they're big, long, for sure. Hockey guys too.
I was a baseball guy growing up, so I'm going to throw that in there.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But to finish my point, I wrestled for 3 months a year. I got to college, and now I'm wrestling, if not year-round, pretty close to year-round. I got pretty good pretty fast.
Yeah.
And I was fresh. I just had a really high ceiling entering into college.
And so you start lifting weights in high school. You start to get a little bigger. And then, college.
Well, a little bit. Everyone in high school thinks they lift weights. And so that they seriously lift weights, and they were just...
I've seen pictures, bro. You're jacked in college. You have no neck and you're jacked.
I appreciate that, but I was never really
no, bro. You were jacked.
I never got really defined.
Whatever you want to call it, you were jacked. Yeah. So when did that sort of happen? You start to get into college, freshman year. You go to West Virginia. Obviously, you follow your brother.
Let me give you a side note there. My older brother came before me. He went second place, third place, second place in NCAA Division I NCAA wrestling tournament. That's very hard to do. The coolest thing about that part, before we kind of put that family thing to bed, 5 years older than me, my brother, he coached me my first 2 years of college. My older brother did. Whenever I won my first national championship, I walked off the mat, and the first person I got to hug was my older brother. I had a younger brother. I have a younger brother who was also 5 years younger than me. I got to coach him and have that similar experience with him as well. So one of the most valuable things in my life is we had that period, the 3 of us, to not just be brothers, but to grow and know each other as men, which was very cool and really valuable.
I mean, besides the family aspect of that, that's amazing. There's also just a huge advantage to having siblings, right? Just you look at guys like Gilbert Burns, who has a brother. You look at John Jones, who has brothers. You look at the Diaz brothers. It's a huge advantage.
I'd make that argument. I would make that argument for sure.
Take us into West Virginia, and now you're coming into your own. You got the spotlight on you a little bit. Kind of just take us through college and the whole experience of it. You're one of the best collegiate wrestlers of all time. And I will add this: what were some of the breakthrough moments, and what were some of the setback moments that you had during those years?
So again, I talk about my older brother, which I feel still is a very big advantage for me. But I, as a young kid, we didn't have all these things. Like, I didn't know growing up. I didn't know college wrestling beyond the Iowa Hawkeyes. I didn't even know who they wrestled. Iowa Hawkeyes were the thing. That's when back in Dan Gable was in his heyday. I knew the Iowa Hawkeyes wrestling. I didn't know who they wrestled. I didn't know what they did. I didn't know what college wrestling was until my brother started getting recruited. When my brother started recruited, I got to go to a couple college wrestling matches, and I said, I can do this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So I was always kind of achievement oriented. Of course, everyone that goes to college to be a national champion. I wanted to be a national champion. The manner and the means in which I won my national championship my freshman year at the time seemed relatively easy. I had lost I lost one match during the season. I injury defaulted the second match. Those are 2 of my 4 losses. But I went and won that national title, what seemed like relative ease. Whenever you do something that seems kind of easy, I don't think it's as fulfilling as it should be. And I really didn't have I never gained a real appreciation for what I had just accomplished. And I think that's probably a common trap that many high achievers or performers can kind of fall into, because we're all, okay, what's next? What's next? When I walked off the mat my freshman year, I hugged my brother, and my other coach, one of my other coaches, Zeke Jones, put his arm around me. He said, "Hey, you know what's better than being a national champion?" I said, "What's that?" And he was like, he said, I can hear his tone, everything to this day. Um, he says, winning it 2, 3, or 4 times. My whole body paused. I mean, I kept walking, but I was like, I had this moment like, oh shit, like we're doing something here. You know what I mean? So from that point on, I set my goal. I'm going to be a 4-time NCAA champion. I'm going to be one of the best wrestlers of all time. And every decision I made from that point forward was directed towards doing that thing. So if we go into the next season, my sophomore season, obviously I put a lot into it. I went through the entire regular season undefeated, but I was winning 5-3, 6-4 against people that I should probably dominate a little bit. The repetition of that and me not appreciating, those workman-like victories, grinding out, finding a way to win an overtime match to a guy even though he's an inferior opponent. I never kept any of that in perspective. It was just, come on, you got to be better. You got to be better. You got to work hard. You got to be better. I shut out everything in my life. Like I didn't party that whole sophomore season. I didn't party at all. I didn't have a drink of champagne on New Year's. So it was like sitting on my couch, just like doing wrestling isometrics. Like I was just, I'm fucking focused, So by the time I got to the NCAA tournament, I was just worn out. I showed up to compete with full intent to win, but I was in a place mentally where I couldn't allow myself just to relax and perform. It was just like a whole bunch of little things that weekend bothered me. On Tuesday they lost my bag, has nothing to do with the tournament that weekend. Like couldn't find a clean toilet, like things like that. Like were just nipping at me. And I couldn't find it that tournament. I went 2-2 to my other 2 losses. Then I was lucky enough to use that appropriately and spend my next 2 seasons undefeated.
Were there people who's challenging you in the wrestling room, at West Virginia? How were you getting better? And it sounds like you were very coachable. It didn't sound like you were kind of off and sidetracking yourself. It sounds like you were being very disciplined and very coachable. But who was challenging you?
I'm so lucky. I literally had this conversation with Robbie Lawler today. I am so lucky, and the older I get, the more that I do this, the more appreciative I become of the coaches that I was being able to surround it with. Craig Turnbull was my head coach. I got to coach beside him for 10 years. Zeke Jones was voted the world most technical wrestler back in, I don't want to date Zeke, but he's getting up there. Probably 92 world champion. Kerry Colott, one of my favorite wrestlers and people of all time.
Legend.
Coached me for a year and a half. My coaches were good about getting me out to the Olympic Training Center in the off seasons. So I'm very, very lucky and appreciative and grateful, all those words, for all the coaching. I guess they call that a coaching tree, kind of, right? As far as like workout partners, I mean, not to be whatever, but there wasn't anyone better than me in the training room. But I was pretty good at challenging myself. As we started to interview, I was a 184 pounder. All of my training partners were 149, 157, 165 pounders. I would make sure to take care of my training partners, but to be stimulated mentally and athletically, I needed that smaller guy to be able to extend scrambles, just to make me continue to keep what separated is my feet and my athleticism and my hips.
Yeah.
So I have that guy in front of me that can kind of keep up with those and keep me stimulated and keep me fresh.
Would you add creativity to that recipe because every time I look at you, when I look at athletes and at a certain level, people have the same sort of tools in the toolbox, right? For the most part. And the difference kind of becomes in the choices that people make and the creativity.
Yeah. Or how much of each ingredient along that same line. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you call yourself a creative wrestler?
It's funny you say that. People ask me, you have any creative skills? Can you draw, paint, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like that part of my brain is dead. Like I can't write. Like I can write, but it's not very neat. But my answer is always the only place I am creative at is in human movement. So when I think of creative wrestling, I wouldn't necessarily say that was my style, but I did create a very what I feel like was a unique style that fit me and who I was wrestling against.
And would you adapt that? Sorry to interrupt you, but would you adapt that to who you were facing, or were you kind of just?
No. I wrestled the same. I wrestled the same.
Yeah.
But part of capturing that goes back to my original point of wrestling with smaller people, that we would create, different positions and scenarios that hopefully when it comes out the other side, you produce a more dynamic mover. And that's basically what I try to do with my MMA guys too. Is I try to develop athleticism more so than I do wrestling.
Right. And when it comes to like when you were getting ready to compete or to get you into that mindset of competition, were you a superstitious guy? What were you listening to music? What sort of got you right in the zone where you needed to be?
I was never a music guy during warm-ups. During warming up, I was always here. I was a sports psych major, so I didn't want to disassociate any of my experience.
Right.
Match day, match day, you got pretty comfortable listening to DMX.
Yep.
But as far as like warming up and stuff, no, I would just do me. I had a very solid routine. I don't think I crossed that line into superstition. But of course, I could go through my whole warm up routine right now.
Give it to us. I want to hear it. I'm very interested in the process.
So I moved up the weight class, so I wasn't a big weight cutter. And I still don't believe in weight cutting. I don't necessarily believe that the weight cutting we see in MMA is worth the squeeze. But we have this mentality that smaller is better for some reason, and it's going to take a major change to get rid of that.
Yep.
So I had the same. I always wear 2 pairs of socks. I wear a blue one up top, white one on bottom. Same shorts, same long sleeve T-shirt with a T-shirt over top.
Sounds superstitious to me, Greg.
Well, it's like what Coach Prime says, right? You look good, you feel good, and if you feel good, you what?
You play good.
Yeah, who I cannot get away from, and I don't want to.
No, of course not.
He's everywhere on my screen. But anyway, back to the weight cutting point. So I move up the weight class. So what I would do is in wrestling, we have a 1 hour weigh-in. So everyone hits the scale, flat weight. In 1 hour, the dual meet starts. What I would do is I would go in, say 90 minutes before that weigh-in time, maybe 2 hours before that weigh-in time, and I would get a full workout in. I would get a good hard drill, 20-minute hard drill, kind of a dominant drill. Then I would do like one kind of like a drill match where I'm just busting off technique. Then I would get one, back to your point of creativity, I would get one, we call it sparring in wrestling, but I would get one play wrestling match in. You would, in BJJ, you would call it a slow flow.
A flow roll or something?
But with intensity.
Right.
I would do that. Then I would go and eat. Because that 1 hour, if you're doing it right, a 1 hour nutrition is not good enough. A refuel is not good enough to compete an hour later. So I would get down below weight most of the time, and I would eat my fuel then. I would consume my fuel then, and then I would get dressed, and that's a really fast hour leading that door. So then I would get to 2 matches out. I'd take 3 matches out. I would take off my sneakers, tie my wrestling shoes up, and I don't know. I think there's a lot of athletes that can like go to that moment where you're lacing up your shoes and you get that final little kind of knot pull, and there's some kind of like a little switch there that kind of locks you in. Man, Chris, you're taking me back here, man. You're taking me back.
Yeah, man.
So I put my wrestling shoes on. 2 matches out, I would start jogging and jumping back and forth. I would break into, I would do two 2-minute rounds of stance and motion, a lot of fast feet type stuff. Once I was warming up for the wrestling match, I wouldn't drill with a partner. Like I wouldn't do any wrestling moves. That was purely designed for me to get my my energy and my awareness right at the right level.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I got really good at wrestling is whenever I figured out where I needed to be physically and mentally in order to compete. And I could remember like being a young kid, like 6 or 7 years old, going through and trying to figure out what worked for me. We all know the young kid, the little kid at the wrestling tournament who's all mean face and flexing. I tried that. I tried to be really cool and relaxed, and I tried everything in between. So at a young age, I was kind of trying to develop all those skills, not even knowing what I was doing. So whenever I got to like real college and real competition, I feel like that's what I became really good at. And that's what started to separate me from everybody else. And it's something that that's a really difficult concept as a coach to kind of convey and walk someone through. But I identify it, and I know when it's good and I know when it's not good. And doing this for a period of time, you watch, you grow some type of intuition and identifying what your athlete may or may not need, how much to push, how much to pick up. Maybe you have to step up and pull him along into the fight. You know what I mean? So it's just really cool how like all that different life experiences kind of just come together.
Would you call yourself a natural at wrestling?
That's pretty offensive.
Is it?
No, I'm serious.
Well, I'll say this because you were just talking about being a child. When I was what I would consider a natural at baseball because the game immediately made sense to me. Like nobody really had to coach me on it. Like, and I could anticipate because I understood how the game was working without, you know what I mean? So
yeah. So we're going down two different tracks.
Oh, right. So just more so like the angles and the space and what you could do to your body and what other people were doing. Would you consider that something that you kind of innately had?
So the innate baseball point you mentioned, I was that kid. No matter what sport I played, I got the rules.
Yeah.
Like I knew what you were supposed to do. I would, and as a real small baseball player, I wasn't the kid you see on Instagram hitting the ball and running to third base like, oh, that's so cute. I wasn't that kid.
Yeah.
But so here's my thing. When I said it was offensive, obviously you didn't offend me. I said I was serious, but in some ways, when it comes from somewhere else, like when a guy goes, man, if I was so fast and so strong like him, I could do that too.
Yeah.
Oh, he's good because he's really talented. He's got really good genetics. That is offensive in a way that it short sells everything that I have done since I was 3 years old. Everything I put in leading into this match, the pain, the discipline, the sacrifice that I put through more so than any other athlete with less talent, that's where it comes from. And as far as like you talked about like the wrestling angles and spacing or whatever it was you said, I don't know if that was innate or natural, but I certainly developed that from a very young age. We got to be careful on how we identify talent, I think, because that everyone says talent, you can run and jump and do this. Talent's a lot of things. Being able to work hard through adversity, that's a fucking talent.
Well, yeah, to that point, I was very good, and we can get back to the burnout thing. I was very good young, but it burned out. It fizzled out as people started to work harder. Like I had nobody in my ear mentoring me to keep me on the path of hard work and discipline. So that went away by high school.
And you see kids like that all the time.
Yeah, right.
What happened to you when you went to college? That kind of thing.
Exactly. So coming out of college, talk about how you got into the MMA game, how you and Henry connected, and what was your transition like into this world?
So I talked a little bit about not placing my sophomore year at the NCAA tournament. The person that knocked me out of the NCAA wrestling tournament was Rashad Evans.
Oh, really?
It was his senior year at Michigan State, my sophomore year. Rashad's my guy still. So I'm not talking shit here. Rashad shouldn't have beat me in wrestling. He just shouldn't have. It had more to do with me than it did him. But anyway, I never talked to Rashad. The only thing I know about Rashad before we wrestled is I would see him in the rankings. That's all I knew. And once we wrestled, of course, I thought about him beating me, but like we never talked to him, nothing until about, I don't know if I had to guess 3 or 4 years later, maybe 5. He was getting ready for John Jones. He was going to fight when him and John fight for the title. And he called me. Not called me. He texted me. He didn't text me either, Greg.
He paged you.
But yeah, he shot me a DM on Twitter. To say, hey, I got this fight coming up. You want to come help me out? Help me out for a couple of days. Season had just ended. It's like March or April. And Like, shoot, I don't know what's going on. Sure, I'll come down. You know what I mean? So I came down, and this is back just the early days of the Black Zillions.
Mm.
So I came down, helped them out for a few days, and I remember sitting on the airplane flying home. I was like, man, that was just a really cool experience. And I remember sitting in my airplane seat, and I remember thinking, like, but there's a lot of shit missing, you know, because I'm going back to my college job where we have the resources, you know, we have the support staff, we, you know, even at West Virginia, which I love, we had these things. This at that time was one of the hottest gyms in the world. Had nothing. It was just a bunch of guys beating each other up. So I had all these things. I was so stimulated. I had all these things that, man, I could do this, and I could, if I was to change jobs, I would do this. I would do this. I would do whatever. And say maybe like 3 years go by, and I had kept in touch with Rashad. Like if he got a fight announced or he fought, I'd say, good job, good luck, whatever. Just casually. 3 or 4 years later, I messaged him and I was like, yo, do you know of anyone in your industry looking for a wrestling coach? You know, I had a job, I was fine, but you know,
Yep.
college athletics wears on you, you know? He was like, shit, man, you should have told me. We just hired someone yesterday. I was like, oh, shit, I'm telling you, it's too late. But anyway, I don't know, another year or two goes by. He calls me, say, hey, we're looking for a coach. You want to come look at this job? And I come down and look at it. So I came down for 3 days, 4 days maybe. Moved down here. Actually, I didn't move. I lived in a hotel down here for 3 or 4 months. July of 15, I think, is whenever I officially moved to Florida. So that's how I got here. And the good thing with what we have going on right now is I talked about sitting on that airplane seat, thinking about all the ideas to ways I can help improve MMA with the relationships and the sponsors and stuff we have going on right now. It's I'm allowed to circle back.
Yeah.
And kind of start checking some of those things off because you know you've been in enough experience in different businesses to understand is like you want to enter a place and have the ability to affect change, to use what you're good at to improve that organization. But sometimes, especially in a place like MMA, you kind of just get caught up in a race. You know, you just kind of got to make it to get the next guy to the fight, get the next guy to the fight. So you kind of lose track, and the culture of the organization kind of starts to change who you are and your skills and what you can do.
Right.
And if you're not aware of that, I think you can just kind of go with the tide, and you're just another coach. So it's funny, you know, 7, 8 years later, I finally have the ability to kind of circle back and, you know, implement some of those initial thoughts.
Yeah, and just talk for a second about Henri in general and his impact and what makes him such a great coach. I mean, he's obviously revered as being one of the best coaches, and you guys together have built something incredible. And your gym is seen as one of the best gyms in the world, obviously. So what's the genesis of that relationship as far as you guys connecting and sort of building your partnership?
Henri and I started with the Black Zillions.
Mm.
They folded. Me and Henri started our own thing because we already established a really good relationship. Whenever we started on this current track is whenever we partnered with Dave Martin at MAG LLC. He is mostly a fighter manager, but I think has been really progressive in putting the pieces, help put the pieces together to what we have established right now. I just didn't want to leave him out. But yeah, Henri and I have really similar mentalities from a functional standpoint. He sees kickboxing very similar to the way I see wrestling, in the sense of the spacing and the angles. Dutch kickboxing is usually hard and fast. I wrestle and I try to get my guys to wrestle fast and explosive. So all that stuff always kind of lined up, but and more so from a leadership perspective. Henri is a very strong leader. I think that's what him being very direct comes in. And that's not the short sell, his interpersonal skills whenever things don't require toughness or directness. That's not to say he can't do that kind of thing. His kind of no nonsense approach is our foundation. That's our foundation. And my personality and kind of my leadership style is I'm kind of like a glue guy. Like if I need to be out front leading the charge, I can do that. But I don't think that's where I'm strongest at. I'm a middle child. I never believe in that middle child stuff. But as I get older, I might be more so than I thought.
There's something to it.
I think so. I again, over the last 5 or 6 years, it's just so cool how you age and start discovering new things about yourself. You know, it's just
Yeah.
fascinating. But yeah, I, I'm kind of the glue guy. I'm kind of the diffuse the conflict guy. I'm trying to, this guy gets put down. I come behind him, man. Don't worry about him, man. Do your thing. That kind of thing. And I think I have a dynamic enough skill set to fill in the gaps with pretty much, any situation that may come up. So obviously, he and I's relationship, our similarities and our differences, are probably what have allowed us to have the success that we've had thus far. Like I said a minute ago, we just pull off of each other very, very well.
Yeah, and you guys have scaled it really well. Is there a point where you feel like there's like a sweet spot? Can it ever get too big where you're dispersing your energy too much?
So I'm conflicted about that. And me and Henry talk about this all the time, because you have the time and the workload part of it, right? We have 65, 70 athletes. So you have the time and energy standpoint. But at the core of us, at the core of Henry and myself, we're also very much coaches. Henry doesn't like to be called a coach. He likes to be called a trainer, whatever you want to say. But that comes out the same in the sense is we both enjoy passing it along. Mm-hmm. That's the kid just getting started out in kickboxing, or that's the kid that's been wrestling their whole life. We like teaching the sport. So that's the conflict, right? So I think if we're here for purely a money-making operation, then obviously I think that we would have to pick a side of which one to go with, right? But I think he and I both approach the sport from a kind of humanistic perspective. That I coached under a guy that we had a lot of guys on our roster that would have never saw a Division I wrestling mat. A lot of people viewed them as taking up space, being invaluable, whatever you want to call it. But the thing I liked is this could be that one thing that adds value to that person's life.
Right.
And if he's here wanting to show up, and he wants to be a student, and he wants to listen, and as long as he fits inside the lane, or maybe he's not in the bullseye of the circle, but he's within the circle, then we're going to work with him. We're going to help him. And even inside of our gym now, we get some resistance from some people about the size of the roster that we carry, and just philosophically, we're not going to change that. We're just not. We're gonna help people.
What are some of the commonalities that you see in the athletes that you see having a lot of success? What are some of the traits that they carry that you see are like the real common traits that make people successful in MMA?
I think that's what's really cool of what this endeavor that we're on at Kill Cliff right now. I don't think there's ever been a true MMA team. We are a true team, but I don't want to say that as if it's a finished product, obviously, right? Because it's constant work, constant massaging. The first thing I look for is, what kind of teammate are you?
What's a deal breaker as a teammate? Like, somebody has a lot of talent, but I can't work with you.
Selfishness. There's got to be a give and take, right? That's why most of our guys live here in Florida.
Yeah.
We have a few guys that fly into camp and fly back out, but 98% of our guys live and train at our place every single day. Yeah, I don't like takers. I don't like people that are just there for themselves, because we're going to travel. I don't care how individualistic you want to make MMA. I don't care how strong of an individual you are or think you are. We're always going to travel further together.
It's way more of a team sport than anybody really realizes.
It is. And no one or very few people step in that cage alone.
Yeah.
The second thing I look for, kind of restructured your question a little bit and made it more specific to our group. But whenever a new guy comes in, I look and see if they blink, because our place could be really intimidating. It can be really intimidating with 60 people on the mat and mostly high-level fighters. But I don't necessarily look for how they compete. I look for how they respond to that stress. If we get a new guy come in, and I don't do this on purpose. Part of the reason why I do it is because naturally I'm pretty shy and standoffish. But if we get a new guy in the team, I have a difficult time working with that guy for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks because I need to watch. I need to watch and I need to observe. And it's not like I could bring you in for a one-on-one session and evaluate what type of fighter you are or can be.
You got to forge them in the fire a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's good or bad, right or wrong. And again, it's not something that was intentional on my part. It's just, at a period of time, I step back and kind of like evaluate just kind of how things go, like we all should do regularly, right? And I was like, I do this. But then I thought about it, and it kind of makes sense why I do it, even though it wasn't intentional. But so yeah, there's a couple things. MMA fighters are really good at sabotaging themselves, whether it be physically, whether it be mentally, socially, whatever it is. Some of these guys have a really refined way of doing it, and it makes sense.
Interesting. I've never heard that. I've never heard that perspective. Can you take us a little bit through, just for people that don't really understand the weight cutting process and what that's like? And that must be an advantage for wrestling just because you have the know-how of how to do it efficiently.
I don't know if it's an advantage for wrestling, but it's certainly a disadvantage for someone that didn't do something like wrestling.
Yeah. So can you just tell us a little bit about what fighters go through in that process?
I hate it, Chris.
Yeah.
I hate it. I'm a wrestling guy that weight cut all my life.
Yeah.
Type of athlete that I was. I needed legs. If I couldn't wrestle with a hard pace, I would just be okay. And whenever I really refined myself and my skills, I wrestled with two goals. I wasn't stop his high crotch. It wasn't do this, wasn't do that. My two goals was wrestle as hard as I can and score as many points as I can. That's my approach to every single wrestling match.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't leave me a lot of variance, right? This is what I'm going to do. And if I take down attempt, I'm still going to do the same thing, But
so for most fighters, for example, somebody who fights at 155, traditionally, again, for people that don't really know, they're usually going to walk around on a day-to-day basis at 175.
So my general rule is I don't think at any point you should be walking around more than 10% over your body weight. That's general rule. There's a lot of research out there as far as like 3% dehydration, 5%, 7% dehydration. In college with an hour weigh-in, we had a 5% walk around rule at all times, but we also weighed in every weekend during the season. And I would think a 175 for a 155 pounder is being pretty generous. But I think I could be more strict with that 10% rule. But they're also professional athletes, and I struggled jumping into that portion of their life. If you want to struggle, go ahead. But anyway, but yeah, I think where that first comes up is probably right around 5 or 6 weeks out of camp, where guys start cutting their calories a little bit and still having to have the same output inside the gym. So that's when it already starts. So now you have guys training just to make it through the training session, not necessarily training to improve their skills. There's a big variation in where guys show up at fight week. 10 to 12 pounds seems to be the average across all weight classes in my experience. I think that's too big. But there's too much data on pre-fight weigh-in, and I think they say like the bigger fighter on fight night has like a 13% advantage or something like that, I think. But I don't know. I don't even know if that really means anything. That's a good place to start. I've had guys start the week as much as 18, 20 pounds overweight, and it's terrible. 10 I'm not crazy about, So if I have that general 10% walk around rule, I would either be handing out a lot of punishment or I would be just making myself crazy. I believe in rules, but they have to be enforceable and they have to make sense to me. You know what I mean?
And if you were calling the shots, would you just do away with weight cutting in general?
Here's my opinion on that, Chris. The UFC, state commissions, whoever it is, until they consider same day weigh-in, they're not serious about a weight cutting issue.
Mm.
It sounds counterintuitive, but I watched it happen with wrestling. Back in 1999, I actually did my senior paper on weight cutting in sports. I want to say like in 1997, 1998, creatine hit the market really hard.
Yep.
Everyone started taking creatine. Well, that following wrestling season, these guys were on creatine all summer, and on creatine going into the wrestling season, 3 people died. And everyone wants to go to the weight cut practices, which were probably shitty to begin with, but you throw creatine on that you requires a lot of hydration, and your liver shuts down, right? So what wrestling did was, wrestling took it and they moved to the current rules. They moved the weight classes up 7 pounds. They went to a 1 hour weigh-in, which is probably a little too short. If I was going to do it in MMA, I would probably do a 2.5 hour weigh-in. Guys will probably still kind of push the envelope a little bit, I think. But it makes sure guys are more prepared for their weight cut, in a better position for their weight cut. It all but eliminates that crash at the end because you have to perform right now. So if that means guys are moving up weight classes, they're moving up weight classes, whatever it is. But I'm not saying that this is the answer, but in my opinion, it should be a consideration.
Adapting wrestling to the cage and just being able to, adding a new element into it. Easy or hard?
For some people, probably hard. I have a unique background for MMA. As an MMA coach, there's no prerequisites or requirements, which I think is fucking crazy. You mean to tell me I can throw a rock and hit someone on the street and they can corner a world title fight and do a weight cut? Yeah. Where can you do that at?
The sport is crazy.
Or a title fight. It's just a lot of little things like that as I do more continue to like dig at me. You know what I mean? Yes, I have a unique background, and I have a multi-sport background. I had a Major League Baseball tryout. I didn't attend. I had a private workout for the Pittsburgh Steelers. After that, they entered me in the 2005 NFL draft, and then I had my wrestling career. So again, I took a long time to observe, and this is just kind of something that I've developed over time, kind of just doing stuff, evaluating what fits, what works, what doesn't. But my approach is I use wrestling as a tool to enhance our overall athleticism. So most everyone that enters MMA, most might be doing a little bit of work, but a lot of people entering MMA are lacking in the wrestling department. It's probably the smallest number of participants, and for just a whole host of reasons. They don't know how to bend their knees, they don't know how to apply force through the ground. They never played a bent over sport. You know what I mean? Their hips aren't used to firing and rotating and creating force and torque. So what I try to do is I try to design my wrestling skills and drills to develop those things. My number one goal is to use wrestling to develop better movers at planes of motion. And that's the approach I take. And one thing I learned early on, I think a lot of coaches would tell you, I don't teach a lot of technique. I go through a lot of concepts, especially for, again, I was just talking to Robbie Lawler today.
Principles, right? Principles.
Well, a lot of wrestling coaches are big on, like, for example, how your hands locked on a single leg. This on top, this type of lock, blah, blah. A lot of BJJ guys like that too, right? For me, I think that's irrelevant.
I'm the same as you when it comes to teaching jujitsu. It's all principle based.
Yeah. I think it's irrelevant how I lock my hands holding your single leg on the cage. As long as I can hold your leg and I can bend my knees and I can be mobile and not get choked, you do it.
Yeah.
And you hold it with your body anyway, not your arms. So it's just like, a lot of little concepts like that. And I'm really big on letting my athletes express themselves on the mat, whether that be in training or in the cage. So like a lot of guys, like some corners are like video games, and you want to put these codes in there. Blah, blah, blah.
I can't stand that.
I think it just makes it way too complex, especially when it comes to wrestling, because all the wrestling action is just hard and fast, and it's over.
And if you haven't learned it by then, I can't tell you on the spot in the cage.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. So like I'm pretty quiet in the corner. Henry is pretty quiet. And I say quiet relative to how I've seen some other people conduct their business. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying my approach. But I tell them, get your head up, go now, stop, right hand. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of my approach. And Henry and I have, back to kind of him and I, is we've developed a rapport. Is like I don't know shit about striking. I'm short selling myself a little bit. I do 10. I know a little bit, but I'm not yelling striking advice. I know what he's going to say. I know how long he's going to say it for. I think that's where that intuition kind of comes in that we talked about before, in those moments. And we can kind of just play off of each other without really discussing it. Like we don't discuss, hey, you do this, you do that, blah, blah, blah. Nah, we just kind of go, and we're just very similar. That the fighter's going to fight. I really think the most overrated part of my job is sitting in that corner on fight night. So overrated. I'm of the opinion that I don't think I can help you win a fight, but I can damn sure lose it for you.
Right. Yeah, that kind of leads me to my next question, which is like, you're a high level wrestler, but like how much in this game of MMA, how much wrestling does it take to offset or neutralize good wrestling? Because it reminds me of like Mark Munoz once had a fight against Damian Maia, and Mark was
Love Mark. Mark is one of the nicest people I know
dude,
I've ever met.
He's the best. But like I think he was like a blue belt or a purple belt when he was going to fight Damian Maia, right? And he won that fight. So it didn't take much jiu-jitsu understanding to offset world-class jiu-jitsu if you know certain principles. Again, the concepts, right? Is it the same with wrestling? I mean, it's a deep ocean for sure, and you get guys who, the Daniel Cormiers of the world, and these guys who are absolute world class. How much does it take to offset?
How much wrestling does it take to offset? So if I have a kickboxer, how much wrestling do I have to develop in him to neutralize a Daniel Cormier type of wrestler? That's your question.
Yeah.
Good question, Chris. And something I never really honestly thought about before. That's kind of a difficult and hard question to answer, because I think it really depends on how a fighter applies their own individual strengths. One thing that I do hate is I don't like, and I haven't found a lot of productivity in a one-on-one session where this guy's going to do this, we're going to do this. Look out for this. And we're constantly hammering home. He's really good at this. Look out for this. Look out for this. I've done that a number of times. And every single time we make that emphasis of it, we get into a fight and the fighter goes, oh shit, here it is. And he gets beat. It's a waste of time, I think, in the sense that it just creates too much anxiety. That guy has a really good double leg. It's like, if I get taken down, we're just rehearsing the wrong shit, in my opinion. So my approach to that is, here's what I try to do, is I try to identify the next 3 or 4 guys on our schedule, our next 3 or 4 opponents on our schedule. I will get their general tendencies. And I'm not going to go to, I don't know, pick someone, Jason Jackson, and be like, your guy's going to do this. We're going to stop it by doing this. I never do that. I introduce it into my group training curriculum. So not only is the guy with the fight picking up on how to deal with this certain situation. But anyone that may encounter that on the team will also begin to approach mastery for that counter or that action or whatever. The guys aren't stupid, so they know what I'm doing, but there's been many times where I just kind of sneak it in there and they get better at something without even realizing it.
So does that mean not drilling down too much on watching film?
No, we'll watch. We'll watch. I think there's an overemphasis of it, but no, we'll watch. We'll watch all of it. We'll watch all of our opponents. So everyone's like crazy about like posting this and posting that on Instagram. There's so much. People get better. They don't necessarily change, in my opinion. There's so much footage out there now. There's so much content out now. Who cares what you post? I'm just being real. I don't think any of that shit matters. There is no secrets left in MMA.
Yeah.
Someone gets good at something, so does everyone else.
Who are some of the up and coming guys that that are coming out of your gym that people are gonna be on people's radar pretty soon?
Nurilo Aliyev at the UFC's getting ready to get called up for his second fight is really good. He kind of resembles Khabib, kind of like facial structure and hair, but you can say that about a lot of those guys, I think, right? I struggle with this question too because I don't have a roster in front of me, but I'm gonna tell you this: we got a lot of good fighters. We got 2 title fights coming up in the next. We got one in early October, one in early November. All of our energy is directed towards winning those 2 belts, those Bellator belts I spoke about. We're in a really good place in the sense that, we've had some pretty core fighters recently move beyond MMA. We have a lot of really good young fighters that I think here in the next year to a year and a half, we have a core group of probably 8 or 9 fighters that are going to win a lot of fights. And I'm excited for all of them. And this is like, we're on like, Henry and I, we're like on the maybe 7th wave of like guys coming and then moving through and arriving to the UFC. It seems to happen in waves. Like we don't just get one guy randomly signed to the UFC or wherever. I don't know the rhyme or reason, or even if there is one. I don't need to, but just kind of seems how things works. So yeah, we're on probably 6th or 7th wave we're on, and I think this wave that's coming through right now is going to be really good. And most of them have already arrived in the UFC and Bellator, PFL. They're just not there yet.
Well, brother, congrats on creating such an amazing culture and magnetizing everyone to come down and train with you guys. I wish you all the best. And
Magnetize. Now we got to monetize.
Magnetized and monetized. That's the thing. All right, brother. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, hold on real quick. Before I let you
Yeah.
go, magnetize. That was a good word choice, by the way.
I believe in that.
The words have value. And
I'm all about the cosmos, Greg. Things happen like that.
Yeah. So to finish that off, I do want to say thank you to you as well. We don't have a deep relationship, but I always enjoy our online exchanges and bump into you on the road every now and then. And as far as back to that magnet, I think my number one goal as a coach, as a leader, as one of the founders of Killcliff FC, is to create the most unique and most holistic training environment anywhere in the entire world. And that's what I strive to do every day. And it's getting some good feedback.
It's getting some good feedback. And I know you're like me where you like to, keep yourself around the best people and always surround yourself with top level people. So I only know there's going to be success in your future. So thanks so much again, brother.
Appreciate you, big dog.
All right, man. We'll talk soon.
Cheers.